ESPN.com ranked all 32 NFL teams. It was Aaron Schatz, our guy who created DVOA and Football Outsiders, who now writes over at ESPN.com. It's part of their analytics department. And they ranked every team's sub 25 talent. So if you're 25, you do not qualify. The Texans and the Lions ranked first and second, two teams that made a lot of noise this past year, both of which have a chance to not only make the playoffs, but fight their way deep into the postseason, maybe get to a Super Bowl this year. So I was really curious to see where do the Commanders come in. And they're basically smack dab in the middle of the league at number 18. The heavy lifting here being done by Jaden Daniels. He is the only listed blue chip player under 25 that they qualified as like a star. The graduated players from last year that they lost, who are 25 now, are Brian Robinson, Sam Cosme, and Jamin Davis. But Danny, of those three guys, I'd only really say Cosme. Is the perennial Pro Bowl type, and he hasn't gotten there yet, but he's on his way. I'll read what they had to say in a moment, but any issues, just first thought on middle of the pack, Daniels being the lone blue chipper, under 25 talent.
If my 6-year-old son and I were doing a tug of war and we were on the same team, that's kind of the equivalent here. Like, in other words, Jaden Daniels is doing all the pulling, with all due respect to my 6-year-old and his core strength. There's not much here besides for Jaden Daniels in the under 25 group. That's kind of roster left bare, covered left bare rather, from the Rivera group. And you're hoping that some of the young guys they drafted fill in, whether it's Sinnott or Johnny Newton or Sandra Still or some of the other guys. But right now, there's nobody else listed here that say, hey, this is an asset under 25 that everybody covets other than Jaden Daniels.
Washington is boosted significantly, he writes, by this year's draft. That starts with the number 2 overall pick in Heisman Trophy winner, Jaden Daniels, a 23-year-old quarterback. Here's who else they listed. Second-round pick, defensive tackle Johnny Newton. Tight end Ben Sinnott, 22 years old. And then nickelback Mike Sanders, still 23 years old. As for players who were in Washington last year, incumbents on this list, so to speak, Jahan Dotson, still 24, is on the list. They list Emmanuel Forbes, who was one of the worst corners in the league, they say, also on this list. Now, just digging on the roster, I found a few other guys. Quan Martin has a lot of upside, is sub 25. Chris Rodriguez at running back, kind of a dime a dozen player, I would say, but should be thrown out there because he played some last year. And then if you think Cole Turner has game and could help them this year at tight end, he's still on the roster. He's under 25. That's about the list.
Mm-hmm.
Daniels, Newton, Sinnott, Sanders Still, McCaffrey, Dotson, Quan Martin, and if you really want to dig deep, scratch the bottom of the barrel, Rodriguez and Turner. But the takeaway should be this. This draft class will determine whether or not they're going to be able to be good in the next couple of seasons. Because it's such a big class, but also they drafted so many times early that if they put on a clinic and they get 3 or 4 studs out of this draft, the turnaround happens fast.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't, though, and let's say Daniels isn't what we think he's going to be, or Newton, the foot problems don't go away, Sinnott turns out to be a little bit of an overdraft, or maybe McCaffrey, who they loved more than everybody else, is just a down the depth chart receiver, and Sanders still is the best player of the bunch or something, man, you're a long, long, long ways off.
Yeah, if it's a normal hit rate. Like that's normal course in the NFL, where the guy that you're talking about in May and June isn't as special maybe as you thought, or isn't as hit the ground running as you thought. That's life in the NFL. That happens. That's the normal course of events. The guys that are great at this don't get that kind of a hit rate. If a bunch of dudes do hit though, this time, and they hit early, hit quickly, this list will look a lot different. But at the moment, the outside perception looking in, which I think is a fair one, is there's a lot of variable beyond Jaden Daniels. And even that, a quarterback entering the NFL, there's a lot of growing pains to come, I'm sure. But you look at some of the other teams that are a few spots ahead of them, and there's 2, 3, 4 guys. You're looking at a tandem like Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson for the New York Jets, and a number of other guys that are in there also receiving votes type category. It's just different. And again, it's not about this regime. They've had their hands on this roster for a couple of months. It's the previous one. Just didn't layer, didn't stack, swung and missed a bunch. And it's, hard to layer talent that way. And it's not automatic, by the way, that you're good if you have a bunch of guys under 25. You could be, one of the prime teams in the NFL at this point, ready to win right now this minute. It's not like the Bills have a banner roster of guys under 25. They got a bunch of guys in their prime. They're ready to win right now this minute.
But if you're rebuilding,
you should major in this.
You'd like to rank pretty high on this list. I just wanted to give a team, just for a comparison's sake, that's at the top of the rankings here. So I scroll up to the Houston Texans, who are considered the most talented team under age 25 in the NFL. Now, Washington had only Daniels as a blue chipper, and he's very much still, I would say, it's a guessing game as to what he's going to be. I think most of us feel pretty good that he's going to be a good rookie, and he's got a chance to be excellent, but we really don't know. The difference with the Texans blue chippers, C.J. Stroud's already proven it. That guy's outstanding. He's going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the league this season. Their edge, Will Anderson Jr., who they drafted in the top 5 last year, has already put the pelts on the wall. You've seen it. That's a really, really good player. Derek Stingley Jr., only 23, becoming one of the better corners in the NFL, ranked 14th in coverage DVOA last season while snagging 5 interceptions. So they list those 3 as their blue chippers. And then you look at the rest of the roster. Second round rookie Kamari Lassiter is going to start at corner opposite Stingley. He's 21. Wide receiver Tank Dell. How good was he last year? He's only 24. Had a great rookie season, over 700 yards, 7 touchdowns before getting hurt with a few games left. 9th among wideouts in ESPN receiving tracking metrics. Then they've got their offensive line. Left guard Kenyon Green, center Drew Scruggs, 23 and 24 respectively. A linebacker, Christian Harris, started 12 games a year ago. He's 23. I could continue, but the point is, you see the difference. Like with the Commanders, we're going, well, if all their picks hit and all these guys are really good, then they're going to have 5 or 6 great players under 25. The Texans have that already, plus their draft class coming in. That's the difference.
Exactly right. There's, the phrase pelts on the wall really kind of carries it, right? Guys that have already done it and the promise of more. We have the promise of more. That's the difference, right? There's no incumbent that had a great season at 23 years old last year. I'll be on this list for another season. There's no 22-year-old that broke out. The best.
There's not one Rivera drafted or signed player on this list. What an indictment that is.
100%.
Like the Lions have Penei Sewell, Aiden Hutchinson, Sam Laporta, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Jahmyr Gibbs, all budding stars that are not yet 25 years old from hitting in 2 or 3 years worth of drafts going back now. The Ravens, Kyle Hamilton, Zay Flowers, Tyler Lindbaum, Nate Wiggins, Roger Rosengarten, Isaiah Likely, David Ojabo, and you could go on and on and on. Rashad Bateman, maybe. How do the Commanders have nobody? Like Dotson, maybe, if he has a breakout and proves that last year was an anomaly because he didn't have help from a coordinator or quarterback. But that front office and coach was here for 4 years, and they didn't have one guy on this list when they left.
Yeah, so Drew Scruggs, who's listed for Houston, won a handful of picks after Quan Martin, where Washington clearly had a needed offensive line, and they weren't interested in him or a number of other guys that started and played significant snaps for their respective teams in the interior part of the offensive line, which had to be completely overhauled again, kind of post-Rivera. So I know that wasn't the point of this segment, just to beat up on the previous regime, but it really shows you.
It's hard not to.
Yeah, where it's like that stagger when in like Olympic type racing in the 400 where everybody's running the same race or running the same distance. What if you doubled the stagger and said, now make up for it? I mean, it's really, really hard to replenish your roster when you're not layering talent, when you're not hitting draft picks at such a high rate, and then you're supplementing in free agency, and those are wrong too. You're left with a 4-13 roster that's bereft of anything other than the hope that the new guys hit at an unreasonable shooting percentage.
I think it's also hard to find a way to make sense of a batting average that low in the first 2 rounds.
Right.
You didn't hit on one. There wasn't one guy in the early rounds that you drafted that just accidentally became excellent. I mean, man, I know it's not supposed to be a referendum on the Marty Party in the Rivera era, but my goodness.
Hard to ignore that.
Now, the Falcons, 25 and under, ranked in the top 5 here. Penix, Bijan, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, among their sub-25-year-old blue chippers, without even getting into their new class that they just brought in. The Bears, Caleb Williams, Darnell Wright, Rome Odunze, obviously heavy lifting of this recent draft class, But even they, not always in the first round. Tyreek Stevenson, Kyler Gordon, um, Tyson Bagent, Zach Sanborn. Like they've gotten production from guys all over their draft history recently. And it just didn't happen to that extent here.